as we consider ethos, the first thing we consider is ourselves. So we pointed out that there are three things regarding your ethos that you need to be concerned with. Number one is yourself, number two is your appearance, and number three is your language. So in considering yourself, remember that you present a character to your audience. Some of that character comes outside of the rhetorical situation that you're in, outside of the speech. It's what you bring to the table, the ethos that you bring to the table. Some of that is established within the discourse itself. So as we're speaking and even as we're writing, and I think that's something that students are not aware of, is that they are making an impression even as they write. You need to be mindful of the impression that you're making with your audience and of the audience's perception of your character, which, by the way, they perceive even as you speak. Just think for a minute about yourself in a chapel. You've got a guest preacher. His ethos is helped a little by the introduction that he receives, but maybe you've heard of him before, maybe you know a little about him, maybe you don't. He might not be in any way connected to anything in your past or your life. You know nothing about him other than that your college is putting him up on the platform. That's enough to commend him to you, but then you also are looking at him. Is he the kind of man that you should be listening to or not? You know, even more so, that's the case if you're outside of chapel, if you're watching somebody or listening to somebody speak, and you're not sure whether this is someone you should be listening to or not, whether this is someone that you agree with or not. So you're listening to him and you're taking clues from him and his demeanor, whether you should be listening, agreeing with him, disagreeing, and so on. It all plays into this. Even so, you also, as a speaker, are making an impression on your audience. That's what you need to remember. So, let's talk then about the qualities which most commend a rhetor. Aristotle said there are three things we trust other than logical demonstration. These are practical wisdom and virtue and goodwill. So within a discourse, any kind of discourse at all, within a discourse, you as a rhetor must present yourself as a character who seems sensible and well-informed about the issue, who seems honest and trustworthy, and who seems to have the best interests of the audience in mind. This points out then the three mistakes of ethos. The first mistake is that of being or seeming to be uninformed. The second mistake is to have bad moral character or to seem to have bad moral character. And then thirdly, the mistake of having a lack of goodwill for the audience. Now, you may or may not have goodwill towards your audience. You might be indifferent towards your audience. You might only be caring about what you're going to say or what you're writing. But nonetheless, your audience wants to know that you have their best interest in mind. If we put those mistakes of ethos into a positive light, a rhetor must seem to be intelligent, first of all, to be of good moral character, and then thirdly, to possess goodwill towards your audience. All right, now, this is ethos in a nutshell. But of course, there's much more to it than that. I want to go back and break this down in more careful detail now. Now, for full disclosure, I want you to know that many of my notes have been taken from this book, Ancient Rhetorics for Contemporary Students by Sharon Crowley. It's a book we considered for a textbook for our rhetoric class and chose Corbett's book instead. But on this issue in particular, Crowley goes into a lot of detail that I want to give you. The first thing, though, is that we need to understand the difference between personality, character, and reputation, and especially how those things fit with ethos. If we would understand ethos, we must understand the difference, first of all, between personality and character, and then how both of those affect our ethos. So I want you to think for a minute about people you know. Think about your friends for a minute. All right? I say your friends? Top 5. Who comes to mind? When I ask that question, probably some names come to mind. But then when their names come to mind, a face comes to mind as well, a face connected to that name. You attach something physical to that name, and that physical presence, in fact, is what gives meaning to the name. So I'm not going to ask you to think about Joe because you want to know Joe who. And then you say, I don't know Joe. So you're thinking about your friends. And of course, the first thing right now, you're probably thinking about their physical features. You're picturing in their mind what they look like. Maybe you're not dwelling on what their nose looks like and their mouth looks like. With your friends, you probably haven't spent a lot of time thinking about that, unless that's what you're prone to think about. But their face, their size, their shape, their gender all become a vital part of the identification of that person. I would guess that some of your friends are more physically attractive than others, and some are physically attractive in different ways than others. But if I ask you why that person is your friend, most likely you won't tell me anything about their attractiveness. Instead, most likely you would describe some aspect of their character or personality, or really most likely a mixture, a combination of the two. So now think about that, because every one of your friends is a mixture of personality and of character. There are certain things that your friend does because that's natural to their personality. Their personality influences the way they behave. There are other things that they do that are a part of their character, and that's distinguished from their personality. Can you distinguish between personality and character? Well, I want to think about that for a minute. This won't be extremely scientific. I think there are more things that could be said about it, but this is what I want to say right now. First of all, both personality and character come from the inside. They are what a person is, not just what that person looks like. They're internal, not external. When my grandmother died in a car accident a few years ago, she was in her 90s and actually survived the accident and died on the operating table later on. When I went to the funeral, my aunt greeted me at the viewing and said, "Don't go look at her. Don't go look at her," she said. "She doesn't look like Grandma." And my aunt was right. There, laying in that coffin, was the woman that I had known as my grandmother since my earliest years, when I was just a little baby, and I don't remember meeting her because I had known her for my whole life. She's laying there in that coffin. It wasn't her. In her case, it didn't really look like her either. They had done a pretty poor job of reconstructing things, and probably partly because of the accident and so on, it had disfigured her a little bit, though not grotesquely, but nonetheless, it was the physical appearance. It was the bodily form and shape. It wasn't my grandma. My grandma was spunky. She was always a feisty kind of woman. She liked to give you a hard time and harass you about things. And she was funny and delightful, and she was laying there dead. It wasn't her. Her personality and her character went with her soul and her spirit when she died. We have an external feature. In fact, personality and character have an external feature. Both will make an impression. A person's personality looks a certain way. Their character even looks a certain way. And you could even describe it. So both personality and character make an impression. They will impact a person's reputation. When a person dies, their personality and their character, though, die with them. Well, I suspect that neither personality nor character really die. I think that they're translated with the person into their eternal state. If you think about it, whether a person goes to heaven or goes to hell, they're still the same person that they were before. So I don't think that when we get to heaven, we certainly our fallenness will be stripped away, but the essential person will remain. And though our character will be transformed and we will be in the image of God and bearing the image of Christ, yet we will be doing so individually and uniquely as people. I think the same thing the people in hell. I don't think that a person who was really just an assertive, aggressive kind of person is going to be any different in hell, though I think he'll rail against God. I think he'll hate where he is and what he's doing and so on. I don't believe that he's going to start suddenly loving God when he's in hell. He's not been redeemed. He's not been changed. Hell, I don't think, changes him. I think it makes him more of what he is, but highlighting the bad. Whereas in heaven, a person would be perfected, brought to perfection. Now, I'm not giving you scripture on these things. I'm ruminating here for a minute. But I'm saying that I think that personality and character goes with your spirit and soul, with the innermost part of yourself. They belong to the spirit rather than to the body, though they're both vitally connected to the body, and in fact, they are part of what animates you as a person. If a person, though, think about this. If a person were on fire, for lack of a better description, a person were caught in a fire and badly disfigured by the flame, their body burned intensely, in a way that significantly altered their physical appearance, they would still be the same person on the inside. They'd still have the same personality. They would still have the same character. No doubt the alterations in their physical appearance would affect both their personality and their character. Some features of their personality would be highlighted and enhanced more by the struggle of dealing with their disfigured features and the physical change. Their character might be strengthened by it. And also, some of the poor character that they develop through their life might be highlighted through it. They might be damaged by it internally, most likely will be. But they still have personality, they still have character. Now, I think that what happens to our body affects our soul and spirit. The truth is, neither personality nor character are fixed in a permanent sense. Our personality and our character changes through life. They're not fixed and permanent. We all grow. We all change. We all face challenges and difficulties, successes and failures, and all of these things affect what we are on the inside. They affect our personality. They affect our character. I am intentionally being a little bit philosophical here, but my purpose in all this is to get you to think about about personality and character, so that we can understand their relationship to ethos. Pardon me. When I was in college, I was really going through a particularly difficult time in my life. And I met my wife at that time, and when we were dating, she used to call me Eeyore. I probably shouldn't tell you the pet name. She doesn't call me that anymore. But a part of it is that I was kind of sulky and mopey, and I had a lot on my mind at that time. But a lot of those things have gone away. I've overcome them, or situations that were very difficult have been repaired, relationships been repaired, or we've just moved past it. And God has brought me through that. And so I have in a sense, my personality is different now than what it was in college. In fact, some would say very different than what it was when I was in college. Here are some things then that you need to understand. Personality tends to be more of an inherited thing. You are a combination of personalities, your mother's personality and your father's personality. I marvel at my daughters who do certain things that I think, how did that end up in her DNA to do that? She responds to situations like her mother. And the older she gets, the more like her mother she gets. You know the old saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, I am my mother after all. I see that in her. I see that in both my daughters. And probably my wife sees it in my sons more than what I do. Different aspects of me and different aspects of her. In our personalities that are blended together in a variety of ways in our children. Personality is what a person is by nature. The dictionary actually offers as its first definition of personality the quality or state of being a person. I always love those kinds of really helpful definitions. But it really is a part of being a person, is having personality. Personality includes behavioral and emotional characteristics, to quote the dictionary again, certain traits and qualities that belong uniquely to a person as an individual. You might be familiar with Tim LaHaye's book, The Spirit-Controlled Temperament, or at least you might be familiar with his taxonomy of personality types. You might not know that LaHaye's source for these personality types was Aristotle. He took and built on what Aristotle taught about personality, and in fact, as I believe LaHaye is a psychologist, a Christian psychologist, I believe that when he was studying psychology, he was studying Aristotle's view of personality and so on. Aristotle was the first to recognize that there are some distinct features and qualities that characterize certain personalities. Aristotle divided personality types into sanguine, phlegmatic, choleric, and melancholy. Now that might be familiar to you. At least you've heard people say sanguine. You've been at Fairhaven for more than 2 months. You've certainly heard someone say melancholy or sanguine or something like that. The sanguine personality is the bounce off the walls, new idea every minute, boundless energy, lack of focus, poor concentration kind of personality that's friends with everyone and close with nobody. The phlegmatic personality is the calm, easygoing, unflappable, and also cold, indifferent, apathetic, cynical type who finds fault with everyone, including themselves, and usually is very skilled in pointing out those flaws as well. They lack motivation, however, to offer any help, and would rather offer a sneer than a hand. The choleric personality is the hard-driving, conquer the world, fix everybody's problems type. Cholerics are natural-born leaders, crusaders, polarizing personalities who never met a problem they couldn't fix. They tend to be extremely self-willed and are often very disciplined, and in fact, in my experience, they consider self-will to be a virtue. The melancholy is the moody, dark type of personality, spend a lot of their time in some kind of state of depression ranging from mild to extreme. Melancholies tend to be artistic. They're also more compassionate. They feel deeply, and they take everything very personally. Now, a couple things to say about that. First of all, Aristotle's taxonomy of personality types is not scripture, and it's not scriptural. I do believe some have taken this too far. LaHaye, for instance, offers a personality test so that you can find out what your dominant and what your secondary personality type is. And there are some who obsess about knowing what your personality type is. I think this is a way of pigeonholing certain people so that you have a casual way of dismissing misbehavior and so on because, well, they're just a melancholy. It can be helpful to think of personality this way because it can sometimes help us to understand people and why they behave the way they do. And some of our behavior is tied in to our personality. We will react to certain things differently than others based on our personality. That's why I have 5 kids. And with all 5 of them, if I said, congratulations, you just won $1 million, all 5 of them would respond differently to that. There would be some similarity, but there would also be some distinct differences between all 5 on something like that. So we should not use these personality types as a way of dismissing people or excusing bad behavior. It's certain that certain personality types will make a person sin in unique ways that are unique to that type of personality, and even common to that type of personality. So if these personality types help a person to understand himself or to be more understanding towards other people, especially other personality types different than your own, especially the kind of personality types that annoy you. Like, for instance, I'm very annoyed by sanguines. You might have recognized that in my description. I'm also very annoyed by phlegmatics. So I won't say anything else about any of the others, but if it helps you to understand yourself or be more understanding towards other personality types, then that can be helpful. Let me add that my belief is, though you may have a dominant personality type and you may have a secondary personality type, and you might even have 2 or 3 mixes of personality types, I believe that our personalities are as unique and as individual as we are. As unique as our fingerprints, as unique as our DNA, as unique as our voice, as our looks. It's amazing. There are right now 6 billion people on the face of this earth. That's right now, at this moment. 6 billion plus. I don't know if we really know how many people are living here, but no 2 are alike. And no 2 have been throughout history. That's amazing. Shows the infinite creativity of our God. But I am discussing this in terms of ethos, and so I don't want to get off track here, because personality will have a powerful impact on our ethos. Now, character is very different from personality. Character might be connected to personality. Certainly, our personality type will affect our character. And there will be certain pitfalls of character that are common to certain personality types. But for the most part, this is something you need to understand. You don't really have a choice about what personality type you are. All right? What you do have a choice about is your character. Which parts of your personality, which temptations you will give in to, which ones you will resist and fight against and seek to overcome, which flaws of your personality you will overcome, and those flaws are overcome by your character. When we speak of a person's character, we're speaking of their moral fiber. The dictionary defines character as moral excellence and moral firmness, as in a man of sound character. So character has more to do with a person's discipline and is directly affected by decisions he makes, by his will, by his resolve in matters, especially matters of right and wrong, ethical decisions. Where a personality really has more to do with how you relate to other people and how you interact and so on. So I want you to consider the 2 together for a moment, personality and character. Personality is more visible to us. It's more immediately apparent. Well, character tends to be more or less beneath the surface. Usually when you meet a person, you will observe their personality fairly quickly. It'll be fairly obvious just by the way they greet you and respond and so on. Their character will be revealed over time from their response to different circumstances. The truth is, It can be difficult at times to distinguish between a person's character and their personality. We are all a mixture of the two. So, what does all of this have to do with ethos? Well, first, let me point out that personality and character, as I said, have more to do with what a person is. Ethos has more to do with what a person appears to be. Did you catch the difference there? Personality and character has more to do with what a person is. Ethos with what a person appears to be. We might think of ethos in terms of reputation, though reputation is not an exact synonym for ethos. Personality will have the biggest impact on the impression we get of a person. The biggest immediate impact. Personality has the biggest immediate impact. So personality shapes a reputation in the moment. There will always be certain personality types that we prefer and certain personality types that rub us the wrong way. And that influences our impression, especially our first impression, our immediate impression of the person we're observing. That, by the way, is why you should not allow first impressions to be final impressions. Why do we need to think about this? Well, in rhetoric, we have to think about the fact that we often are making first impressions. In rhetoric, personality impacts the speaker, the writer's ethos. And yes, personality comes out much more in your speaking than it does in your writing, but it does come out in your writing. Especially the more you learn to express yourself, your own thoughts clearly and effectively. Your personality will come out more and more. I would say in college, as you're learning these things and learning how to write well, your personality is kind of blocked up by your inabilities and the difficulty you have with writing and so on. But as you become more skilled, your personality will come out in these things. Of course, the speaker's personality will be more apparent, as I said, in speaking than in writing, but it comes out in writing. Character, though, this is what you need to understand. Okay, let me review. Personality has the biggest immediate impact. Character has the biggest long-term impact on a person's reputation. Personality provides us with a very temporal impression. Ultimately, character shapes a person's reputation. A person's reputation does spring out of his character. Your character will eventually undo the advantages that you may have gained through your personality, if you have a great personality. And if you have a bland or difficult personality, your character will also overcome that. This reminds us of the necessity of sanctification in a Christian's life. God intends to make us holy. He already made us people. He intends to make us holy. You know, the Bible says in Romans 8:29 that this is a promise of God. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son. Now, a few moments ago I said that reputation is only about half of ethos. So I need to explain the difference. The difference between ethos and reputation is this: that reputation is what a rhetor brings to the table in a piece of discourse. It's what you bring to the table. Reputation is what an audience already knows or perceives about you as a speaker or as a writer. The impression that the audience has of you before you even begin to speak. That's your reputation. Ethos is shaped outside of a rhetorical situation, but ethos is also shaped within a rhetorical situation. So that brings us to two kinds of ethical proofs, and that will be the subject of the next lecture.